Welcome to College Compass, experts at scholarship.org. For the past 43 years, the staff at the George Snow Scholarship Fund and scholarship.org have dedicated themselves to empowering young people and ensuring they have access to the resources that they need to succeed in their educational journeys. In each episode, we'll sit down with experts to provide practical advice that will help students overcome challenges, thrive, and maximize their college experience. My name is Tim Snow. I'm president of the George Snow Scholarship Fund and scholarship.org, and I'm going to be your co-host for today's show.
And my name is Shannon Elwood. I am excited to be joining Tim as his co-host today. I am the Director of Communications for the George Snow Scholarship Fund, but in addition to that, I bring 6 years of experience working closely with college students throughout their educational journeys.
Well, welcome, Shannon. This is the first time Shannon's co-hosting with me, so I'm excited. She's going to bring a lot to the table here. Today, we're going to dive into the topic of transitioning from college to career. At the time this episode will be airing, many college students will be preparing for graduation. And I thought it'd be a great and perfect time, really, to discuss how soon-to-be graduates can set themselves up for success and confidently navigate this kind of a transition. Our expert joining us today is Brian Montalvo. If I might have messed that up, and I hope you'll correct me. He's the Assistant Vice President of Career Services at Florida Atlantic University's Career Center. Brian is a nationally certified counselor and a certified career counselor. So Brian, before we get into the show too much, if you could share sort of an overview of the FAU Career Center, kind of the services that you provide for the young people that come to you, and then tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience doing what you do.
Yeah, sure. Well, first, thanks for having me on the show. I'm beyond excited to be here. And you got the name almost right. And
Okay.
This is very common. So it's Brian Montalvo.
Montalvo.
But it's very common to pronounce it that way. So the FAU Career Center provides comprehensive services for our students, and it really begins even at the point of admissions these days. So the moment a student applies to Florida Atlantic University and they get accepted, they're receiving career information from us. So way back when, you wouldn't even engage in this kind of information until you were junior, senior year. Now you're starting to think about yourself as a professional. Nowadays, the services come very early. So what's happening early on? The Career Center is providing students with information about their major, occupational information for that major, information on salaries, etc. We move from that admissions process into a very deep exploration phase. A lot of students don't know how to view themselves as more than just a student. They see themselves as that student they've always been from the age of 5 to about 18, very transactional. I'm going to go to school. What are my assignments? What do I have to do to achieve success? Well, when you get to college, a lens has to change. They've got to see themselves as a professional in training. And some of the services we provide help guide them in that direction. So we offer career assessments, a full suite of career readiness tools from resume writing to interview skills, how to navigate a job fair, how to negotiate salaries, how to job search effectively, etc. We also have a very strong team when it comes to experiential learning and internships. Going to school is fantastic. Getting that education is needed, but you've got to gain some hands-on experience. You've got to really feed that professional in training. So we have a whole suite of services around internships. The last bucket of services is really tied to launching them successfully beyond FAU's walls. And it's our employer engagement side. So we're hosting job fairs on campus, about 15 every year. We're bringing over 1,000 unique companies physically on our campus. We're providing these great networking opportunities. So overall, it's just an extremely comprehensive center, a lot of services. We're seeing about 21,000 unique students every year. And the way to kind of picture these are 4 large buckets. Career coaching is one, internships is another one, employer engagement, and then faculty engagement.
Well, that's amazing. It's a credible service that you provide for your students. And I look forward to learning, diving a little bit deeper into all of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to ask, actually, when was the right time to start going to the Career Center? But, it sounds like you already answered that. I would be curious, is it ever too late to go to the Career Center?
That's a great question. It's never too late. we always say come early, come often, but come in a meaningful way. Walk through our doors. We tell our students from day one, semester one, start to, come in, maybe get one appointment under your belt. The moment you hit the college campus, there is a transitional period, and you've got to get your college sea legs, so to speak. Once you've made that adjustment, come on in and say, hey, I'm brand new here. I'm going to be majoring or studying XYZ. I would love to know, where should I start? There is a very detailed career timeline. There are certain items we want students to hit, certain resources, services, and programs each and every year. So if a student comes to us their last year and they've never utilized our services, that's okay. There is some catching up to do, but we will rewind that timeline for and say, hey, we've noticed you haven't done this step yet. Let's go ahead and start here and get you caught up. So there's never a bad time, but if we could control and have a prototypical student, we would love to see them at least once every semester at minimum.
Oh, I think that's really important to highlight, the recommendation of the frequency. And then what about internships? What would you say to someone who feels like they waited too long to go and obtain an internship?
It's never too late for the internship. Internships are the most impactful thing a college student can do nowadays. Whether they've got a stellar GPA and they just got to get that experience. When we survey our employers, the folks hiring our students, and we ask them, what is more important to you? Are you looking for a 4.0 perfect student with no experience? Or would you prefer someone with a 3.0 and maybe 1 or 2 internships under their belt? Hands down, 9 out of 10 times, we're hearing the same things. We really want that student who has that proven track record. So acquiring an internship is critical. It's no longer, in my opinion, something nice to do. You have to do this before you leave your college campus.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm just curious, do most college campuses have this type of service for their scholars? I mean, it sounds very comprehensive, and I'm hoping that the answer is yes, because we've got scholars all throughout the country, and I think that they should all be taking advantage of this kind of an opportunity.
Yeah, career centers on a college campus, they're very commonplace. Now, they all operate slightly differently, and FAU is very unique. So I'll brag for just a moment.
Yeah.
I mean, FAU has had the Career Center 5 national awards in the past 7 years now for an array of services, from our ability to integrate our work, our careerness work, into the faculty curriculum. Our practitioners have won awards. Our abilities to integrate the skills, the top skills employers are looking for, into our internship programs. And there are other ways we've actually won awards. So yes, you're going to find these types of centers all over the country. Any student anywhere out there should be engaging with career services. They're always readily available. There's no cost, and they're very much wraparound. So an example of a wraparound service, we go as far as offering free professional headshots. So why do we do that? Most applications nowadays are happening in a digital medium. An employer sees you digitally or socially before they see your actual resume. Well, using your prom picture, although you look adorable and however you were dressed that night, it's just not as professional, or a selfie with a bad angle. So we offer free headshots. In Boca, we're very fortunate. We've got a great community. They're providing us with professional attire, and we're giving it away to our students. So a student can come and say, I need a tie, I need a blazer, I need professional attire in order for, go to the interview or go to a job fair. We provide that at no cost to our students. So yes, every university will have this. I just don't know if they're going to have it as comprehensive as we're providing at Florida Atlantic University.
Well, that's great, and it's great that you guys are that, like you say, comprehensive with your services. It sounds like an amazing service to all your students, all your scholars. Do you see any kind of common concerns with students, whether it's when they first come in or as they near the end of their college careers?
Concerns in terms of just
anything is there anything that they're worried about? I guess it's a stressful time for them, particularly as it gets towards the end of their college career, because maybe they've been to you or maybe they haven't, and they're trying to catch up. But is there anything that's kind of common that we can communicate to our audience out there that if they're feeling that they don't have to feel alone, that it's sort of something that everybody goes through?
I mean, absolutely. So it's very common for a student to feel overwhelmed during this transitional period. So they've been in this incubation, they've been in these kind of school settings for a long time, and they're about to get launched into the world of work or the real world. I'm doing the air quotes. And there's a lot of anxiety. They feel overwhelmed. One advice I would always give is you're not alone. Don't try to do this on your own. If you start Googling best ways to write a resume, how should I interview? How do I network? What you get back is going to be overwhelming. And you don't know if it's good or bad information. By utilizing these types of services, a career center, we serve as a think tank. We curate good information. So students not out there wasting their time looking for good information. Instead, they're using their valuable time, utilizing good information. So it's an overwhelming journey, and it's one you should not take alone. Work with a professional. So at the Career Center, everyone is certified. They're certified in our field. They're certified either career counselors or national certified, career coaches, or they're career center service providers. There's so many acronyms out there, but these are folks that are dedicating their lives to this type of work, and they help you get organized because it's so overwhelming to think about that big blue sea out there.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think that partnership, like you say, between the student and your staff is really important. The earlier they can establish that, the better, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's helpful to have someone to bounce ideas off of, to hear what sounds good, what doesn't sound good, or maybe what your industry might be looking for, if there's buzzwords to put on the resume for your type of industry you're going into.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the way to look at it, honestly, is almost think of a personal trainer. So you may have a real sense of how to grab that dumbbell. And, okay, if I lift it, I'm going to gain some muscle. But what if you had a professional who said, hey, I see what you're doing. Let's make these 2 or 3 small tweaks. And the gains are going to be a little bit bigger, right? And that's kind of how I see the career coaching element. So I may have a sense how to write a resume. I may have a sense of what industry I want to go into. But working with someone who's a professional in this space, they can say, hey, make these 3 or 4 few, small adjustments, and you're going to see some just exponential gains after that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to ask, so right now we're talking about what college graduates can be doing to prepare for their career. So is there a checklist, or is there a list of must-to-dos? You must get this accomplished by the time you graduate to move on to find a career.
Absolutely. I mean, we've talked about the internship already, but even before that, you would never want to apply to an internship or a full-time job cold. There are a lot of things you've got to do to prepare for that. So one, having that first professional document, that first professional resume drafted, reviewed, and ready at your repertoire. Once you have that resume, the rest unlocks pretty easily. So what I mean by that is once you've got this beautiful document, it displays who you are as a professional, not just a student. It's highlighting the skills you're going to bring to the table, the skills you're going to bring to industry. You can take that document now, upload it into LinkedIn. Now your digital footprint is starting to grow. So you've got to have a professional resume done while you're in college. You've got to practice your interview skills. Doing this is an art form. And the more you do it, the more comfortable you get. We find that it's pretty common for a student to go into an interview, a professional interview, and it may be their first time ever in that kind of space. And what's happening now, they're in that space, anxiety is kind of climbing, they're blanking out, and they're underselling. They're not talking about all their experiences, the course projects, what they've done, their student activities, and how that makes them the right professional for the role they're applying to. So you've got to have the resume, you've got to get an internship, you've got to practice your interviewing skills, and you've got to target an industry. This idea of I'm going to find myself doesn't necessarily work. You've got to be intentional. You've got to work towards creating yourself. So it's okay to be undecided about the next step. It's okay to be undecided about, what internship you want to apply to, but it's not okay to do nothing about it. Mm-hmm. You've got to take some very intentional steps. There are career action plans, because the next question that I get often is, well, there are 15 things I've got to do. What do I do first? By building out an individualized action plan, because your needs may be different than your needs, so you've got to understand what is your career gap, what is the kind of void you're trying to fill, and what makes the most sense for you or whomever.
Yeah.
Well, and you touched on, did you ever get students that sort of towards the end of their college career that they're coming in and going, man, maybe I didn't major in the right thing. for a variety of reasons, right? Maybe the job market is dried up in that field, or maybe they're just not feeling it as passionate about it, having gone through, and maybe even having experienced an internship, and then realizing, I thought it was going to be a lot different than it is. And how do you advise young people like that?
Yeah, very common. So we do hear this often from either a recent grad or someone in their first year of employment. So we still allow all of our services to be open to any alumni, and within 1 year post, they have the chance to come on in. There are no fees, that we're treated as a student. So in those cases, we do see this a lot. We try to help them understand that it's really not about what do I want to do forever. A lot of students put a lot of pressure on themselves, and they're trying to figure out, what do I do forever? Well, if you look at data, only 2% of the US population, and maybe less nowadays, decided an occupation when they were 18 years old and are currently doing that now in their 40s. Only 2%. Right. That's a lot of pressure to say, I got to figure out my whole life right now. So what we say to them is, take that pressure off. Figure out what you want to do next. Now, when you land in that next role, be so good at it that people can't ignore you. And you're going to see that doors are going to start to open. So it's less about the degree and more about the skills. What skills did you acquire from X degree, whether it's sociology or biology or whatever it may be, and how do you transfer those skills over? So in those cases, we really hone in on transferable skills. What are you good at, and how do you apply that in the world of work?
Well, another interesting option, I guess, that they could have, and I don't know, do you ever advise them to pursue either an advanced degree or anything like that? I mean, I don't know if that's ever appropriate.
It's a great question. I mean, that's a question we get asked often. So do I delay the real world or the world of work by going to grad school? We typically don't necessarily advise that. I think there's got to be some intentionality, and it's really about building skills. So I think a more effective approach would be, I have a goal, I have a sense of where I want to land, and how does that grad degree get me there? Now, if you are in a position where you feel you have no options and grad school may just buy you a little bit more time, we have seen that happen. It's not something we would advise. A question we get often, I think it's on this same topic, is what do I decide first? Do I pick my occupation and deconstruct back to a major? Or do I pick my major and then figure out what occupations go with that major? That's a very common question. And honestly, it's going to be up to that student, that scholar. But there are pros and cons to each, right? You choose your major and then you try to figure out your occupation. It's going to be pretty broad. That funnel is going to be pretty wide. And you got to figure out, is my major giving me enough skill set? Not every major has experiential learning or internships built into it. If you look at most college campuses, we'll just use a round number, there are about 60 majors, 5 or 6 are linear. So if you major in social work, you could be a social worker. You major in engineer, you can be an engineer. You major in criminal justice, you're not necessarily a criminal juster, right? So the question becomes, how do I gain that other part of this major? So if my actual major is not giving me that experiential learning experience, how do I acquire that on my own to balance that degree? If you do the opposite of deciding an occupation first, I'm going to be X. How do I deconstruct that? The funnel is way more refined at this point. And now everything you're doing is kind of leading up to that, which is why we tell every student we meet, you've got to see yourself as more than just a student. You are a professional in training. And why does that matter? I mean, it matters from a mindset perspective. If you think you're a student, you're going to be very transactional. Tell me what I need. Thank you very much. I'm going to walk out. But if you think you are and they are a professional in training, the questions you start asking yourself are a little bit different. Now you're asking yourself, how does this club, how does this class, this faculty member, this program, this job fair, this service, how does this help me get to that profession I want to get to? And the engagement level is very different. So that's an advice we always give students.
Well, that's all great advice. I would think that, and I'm curious to ask you how networking helps these students to improve their chances of getting a job or an internship, even for that matter.
Giant. I mean, networking is everything. when it comes to networking, there honestly is nothing more important. You know, they always say the resume is something you typically leave behind versus it arriving before you, meaning you've got a network, you know the folks, and they're like, hey, we've got this opportunity for you. Why don't you bring your resume to me? So the resume is being left behind. The more a student can network, the better off they're going to be. And they have to view their college campus as that giant sandbox of networking. That's a really important mindset to have. But I will say this, networking is hard. And not every student has the ability to do that off the shoot. I am a painful introvert. My role requires me to be very extroverted. You would never guess I was introverted, but I am literally off the charts. And there is a skill you have to learn. So for me, I think it's important before you dive into network, you understand what networking really is. You understand deep communication. There are great books, great resources. I loved like Super Communicators, a great book. I recommend any student to pick up, and you just understand the mechanics of communication. If you equipped yourself with the mechanics of communication, how to ask these great questions as you're asking me now, how to lead, how to follow up with these questions, how to go a little bit deeper, then walking into a room becomes so much easier because now you're actively listening, you're having these great conversations, you're showcasing a lot of curiosity, and before you know it, your network starts to build out. You've got to leave a college campus with a pretty well-established network.
And I would think you would say that the earlier they can start networking, the better, because you're just sort of layering your the people that you now are part of your network, and so by just naturally you're going to have more people at the end of the day that are potentially going to be able to help you.
Absolutely, Tim. I mean, you've got to do this very early on, and it goes back to that mindset. If you're seeing yourself as a professional in training, you're really asking yourself, what can I do from day one? The earlier, the better. So you're going to have some missteps when you start to network in these earlier phases. You're going to say things you may regret, or you may say things that just aren't what you wanted to say in that moment. But the more you can do that, the more refined it gets. So when you do walk into a room of 100 companies at a job fair, you're much more comfortable there than you would be if this is your first time in a space like that. So I agree with you 100%. Do this early, do it often, but do it in a meaningful way with a lot of intentionality.
Oh, that's good advice. Really good advice. So now, let's take a look at starting a career. I mean, can you recommend any strategies? Like, how do they go about landing their first job?
So the landing a first job, I'll talk a little bit about some of the missteps I see students taking, and we call it a false sense of accomplishment. Nowadays, there's a generational thing where students are being very passive. They're behind a screen. They're coming in. They're saying, I've applied to 100 roles, and I have not landed a job. And we're saying, well, it sounds like you're using a very broad, almost like a shotgun approach. You're just kind of saying, please, anyone hire me. And when you have that approach, what you're going to get back is essentially that. Anything and anyone may hire you, and you may be undervaluing what you bring to the table. So the advice that we give a lot of our students is to be really strategic. You want to make sure you're targeting certain companies, understand the company's values. How does that align with your work values? Why do you see yourself there? How can they see yourself there? A mistake a lot of students make is they walk over and they'll say, hey, I've heard of your foundation, but I don't know what you guys do. Tell me more. And instantly you're turned off.
Right.
Versus me walking up to you and saying, hey, I know all about your foundation. I've met a couple of your folks from your board of directors. I know Jay. I know this and this. I know your mission is this. And here's a skill I can bring. Here's how I can help you achieve your mission. You've got to treat it almost as if it's a dating game. An employer needs to feel like you are targeting them. You're the only company I've been looking at, I've been working towards. Whether that's true or not, again, it's a game. They have to feel that way in the moment.
For sure.
And we've seen this sometimes with students fresh out of college is it takes a long time to land a job. It can be several months. So what would you say to someone who is now feeling like a little disappointed in the process?
Be patient. There's a game element to this. On average, it takes about 6 months post-graduation. This is the national data. It's a big number, and that's honestly during good markets, good economies. Right now, we're in the big freeze. So there are, right now the unemployment rate is actually down, but the number of job openings isn't up. So there's a big freeze where people are afraid to move right now. You've got to be patient. These are cyclical. They kind of come up, they go down. it's okay to still be looking for a job. It's not okay to do nothing about it. And it's something I would strongly advise and suggest is don't take it personal. The moment you start applying to jobs and you take your personal that I'm getting rejected, they're not rejecting you as a person. They really aren't. More often than not, your resume is not even making it to that human eyeball. The moment you have that negative mindset of, oh, it's me, it just becomes counterproductive to what you need to do next. It's a game. Applying to a job is a full-time job. But I will say this, you don't want to spend more than 2 hours a day. There is a fatigue to this. It's almost like working out. If I get a dumbbell and do 100 reps, I'm not going to get any more muscle mass had I just done 15 reps the right way. So there is a strategy. There is a way to do this. You've got to relax a little bit, have an outlet, because it's going to take a little bit of time.
Yeah. And it might be that you need to pick up a part-time job or something that isn't necessarily tied to your career, but just so you can have that income while you do the search for the larger career that you're looking for.
Absolutely.
And I would ask, what do you say to someone who is unhappy with what prospects are being offered to them?
Yeah, I would say, at times you've got to weigh these out. So I would never suggest that any student to just rush into an occupation, because whatever job you take for that first job, you've got to be there for at least a year or two. You don't want to be that student who's bouncing from role to role, because you will get that reputation. The world of work is very small. So if you're not excited about the opportunities, you've got to weigh some of these pros and cons. Is there an opportunity that's going to allow me to start to build my professional portfolio? Is there an opportunity that may pay less, but I'm going to gain great mentorship? Allow me to build my network even deeper. Help me refine or grow my skills. That's the real lens that I think students have to look at this. Because if you take a great job, let's say you've got two options on the table. One is paying you well, but the growth may not be there. And one is not paying as well, but the growth is going to be there. If you can delay that instant gratification, if your economics allow for it, you would want that one role where you're going to gain mentorship, really build that portfolio, gain skill, and then continue to grow. That's a hard thing to say, but I've seen it happen over and over again versus the person who took that one really good role. And if you track both of these folks at the same time, 5, 10 years later is just growing much quicker because they gained all the skills that they really needed to propel themselves to that next position where this one just stagnated, right? So
that's very interesting. I never really thought about that, but like you say, that's an important consideration when you're looking at what job you're going to accept. And I don't think anybody really thinks about that too much. It's all about, the money right now, and you really do need to be very forward thinking with it. And is there a way, you touched on it earlier, so I think the answer is yes, but how can a student sort of assess what the job outlook, the demand for them personally is going to be in the marketplace and in that industry that they're interested in? Is there a resource for that?
Sure, there are several resources. One of the better ones is the ONET. So O-N-E-T, so it's by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It's also by, I think, the Department of Labor. So you can actually go into the ONET. You can do it several different ways, but you can just type in the job industry you're thinking about, and they're going to show you what the projections are for the next 5 to 10 years. Oh, wow. There's also a way to search these occupations as what they call hot jobs. So what is going to have the bigger growth? There are two types of growth when it comes to occupation. There's big growth and there's fast growth. So you were describing a part-time job right out of school. These are fast growth. There's a lot of fast growth in hospitality, restaurant industry, construction. I can just get a job fast. Mm-hmm. Big growth has the biggest growth. One of the hardest things for a student to anticipate and think about right now, if you're a freshman, the job you're going to have in the future may not have been invented yet. And that's very, very common. So then how do you prepare for that? This is where you've got to hone in on these skills. Every occupation, whatever it is in the future, is going to have a foundation and a common thread of skills that you've got to develop. Critical thinking is top of that for sure. How you communicate, not just verbally, but written, the social aspects, also incredibly important. The leadership skills, etc. But ONET is a great tool. Career centers also have tools such as Lightcast. So Lightcast aggregates the past 12 months of job postings, and it shows you a couple of things. Where were the most jobs posted? what were the top skills they were looking for, average salaries, etc. In Florida, they also have something called My Florida Future. It's a website produced by the government or by the state, and it'll show you salary expectations 1, 5, and 10 years post-graduation, and it'll also show you some top industries as well. But it's very much a game of staying informed. Using your career services, it's our job to stay informed. Now, go to a job fair. Let's say you're in your first year. I'm not looking for a job. I'm not looking for an internship. Walk into a job fair. You've got 100, 150 unique companies in one physical space. If you want to know what's in your backyard, just walk around that room. These fairs are coming every semester. There's typically 10 to 15 across all universities. Every university does do these job fairs, and you're going to get a really strong sense of what's in your backyard. If I were to ask you guys today, name me every unique occupation that comes to mind, and I had a pitch count, you may not hit 100. I've done this with an audience of 2,000 people. We got to about 87, right? Lawyers, cops, teachers, all the conventional jobs. There are over 1,200 unique occupations in the United States alone.
Okay.
So how do you find that's a hidden job market? You've got to do a little bit of research. That's where Google is your worst enemy, and a career center can become your best friend because we're curating these great resources. You don't have to ask these questions. We will supply you with the ONET or the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Every job on these websites, you click on it, it'll give you a lot of information. Typical day at work, what skills you need, average salaries for entry, mid-levels, and experienced folks, and a lot more is all produced for you.
Well, that's amazing. That's great to know.
Yeah.
So now you've got a student who's been offered a job. What are the things that they should be considering? You mentioned a little bit about earlier, but are there other considerations that they should be asking their potential employer before they accept that role? Because there's a lot of things, benefits and that sort of thing that first-time job applicant may not even be aware of.
Yeah, no, very true. They're not aware of. Most of them are just looking at that salary question, and they're not asking about the fringe benefits. I think the most important question a young scholar entering the world of work has to ask is, what is the opportunity for growth? What is the opportunity for professional development? And what is the opportunity for mentorship? If you're taking a brand new role and you get these 3 items, your growth is going to just skyrocket because you're going to have a chance to continue to learn. Learning does not stop after you get that diploma, right? Getting that diploma says you are a scholar, you've learned how to learn, and now you got to keep applying it because the world of work is very fluid. It's almost like a river. So if you picture a river, this Mississippi River, it's the same body of water, right? So this is what the world of work looks like. It's the same body of water, but underneath there's so much change happening. So as a student who's entering the world of work, if you can continue to get professional development, understand your growth opportunities, and understand how you can be mentored, these are the questions you should be asking right at the point of negotiation.
Well, that's good advice. What advice would you give the students? Like, again, they got their first offer, and the potential employer is presenting a salary to them. How do they know that that's even the appropriate level that they should be at?
Yeah, I love this question. This question gets asked so often. So you can't walk into an interview cold, and you cannot walk in to salary negotiations uninformed. You've got to use the resources I've mentioned, like the ONET, BLS, Glassdoor, LinkedIn. There's so many resources that provides you with what we call, labor market information. There's local labor market information. There's national labor market information. A lot of students will say, oh, well, these jobs should be paying X, Y, and Z, but they're looking at it in a different state, different region. You have to understand the market you're going into. When you have that research done, you should be creating in your mind a range. So you should not be negotiating on a hard number. So let's say, as an example, they're offering you 60, but you really want to land a little bit above that. The range you should be providing back should be a range. 65 to 70 is where I was thinking. How close can we get to that versus just saying, I'll only work here if you pay me 72, right? It's just unattractive, turns off the employer at that point.
It sounds like an art.
It is an art.
Well, it all sounds like an art, Brian. And we really want to thank you for coming here and sharing all this expertise that you have. And I'm sure I get the sense that there's even more that we could all talk about. We're out of time today, but we're very grateful for you offering this to our listeners. I know they're going to take a lot of valuable information away from it. So we really appreciate you and you being here to help them.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Thank you for joining us.
So in closing, I want to thank our listeners for tuning in to College Compass by experts at scholarship.org. In our next episode, we're going to dive into managing mental health in times of transition. So stay tuned.
In the meantime, you can learn more about us by visiting scholarship.org. For more tips and updates, don't forget to follow us on social media. You can find us on Instagram and LinkedIn at George Snow Scholarship Fund, and on Facebook, TikTok, and X at Snow Scholarship. And as always, we look forward to guiding you through your educational journey.